Good evening to everyone joining us right now. We are going to get started with our brief announcements. So come on in and make yourselves at home.
Hello?
Hi, Bart. We're just running our announcements.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that the audio worked.
Yeah, the music is off on this one.
Okay, then I will just sit here waiting.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I'm sorry there was a little technical difficulty right there with no sound, but we are glad you guys are here. As you're coming in, tell us what kind of cultivar is your favorite, or if you have a nativar that's your favorite, or even a native plant. Let us know which is your favorite in the comments. My name is Erin Castillo, for those who have never joined one of our webinars before, and I am the content creator for the Southern California Horticultural Society. And tonight we have a great program. We have Bart O'Brien from the, the regional, oh gosh, how did I just forget the name? I have Arbot in my head, Arbot Gardens, because of Instagram. So the Regional Botanic
Parks Botanic Garden.
There we go. Thank you, Carol. I have hashtags and Instagram handles running through my brain. So tonight's program, even if I don't know where Bart is from, is going to be great. We're going to get started with our plant forum. So I am happy to introduce Steve Garisher, who is our plant guru, and he's going to present some of the plants for tonight. Steve, take it away.
Thanks, Erin.
You're our plant guru now.
And let's see that this will work. I did do, are you getting the screen?
Yes.
Oh, finally, because the last few months it's been a trial. I actually went in early and did my settings. I'm Steve Garisher, current Vice President of the Southern California Horticultural Society. And I present the plant forum, and this is where normally, if we are in-person meetings, you can see by the picture there, we do a table and discuss like what Bart is presenting, cultivars. We've discussed new plants, old plants, plants that need identification, and plants that people just want to show off from their garden. So just also a quick little update, considering it is one of those California native cultivars. Last month, I actually put into the forum Cianethus eldorado. No, not eldorado. Sorry, I'm blanking on the name now. Yes, it is. No, it's eldorado, the variegated one. And I just wanted to do an update that there's now a hummingbird nest in that. So I was very happy to see that the other day. It got a late hummingbird nest. So the first plant we'll talk about is, this is Acanthus whitewater. Let me make sure I'm on full. Nope. There we go. This is Acanthus whitewater. And there are a number of variegated Acanthus out there. This one is highly variegated. There's a lot of white in the foliage on this one. I grow, I think, one called Angel Wing. There's a number of them out there. They're a little more tender than the regular Acanthus mollis. And at least in my garden, I have to grow mine in a pot. I think I'm starting to have problems with gophers, and I think the gophers would get to it otherwise. Acanthus comes from the Mediterranean, and for those of you who know your architecture, the foliage is always in the scroll work at the top of columns in Greek architecture, and it's because of the plant represented to them, birth, life, death, and then regeneration, because it comes back from it. It actually goes away in the late summer. It's completely dormant, and then it springs up again with the first rain. So these cultivars are really quite stunning in the garden. They actually provide a big pop of color in partial shade. And they will scorch in hot sun. So you do need to keep them safe from hot sun, and they're a bit frost tender as well. Laura Bauer is actually displaying this one tonight. And also the next is hers. It's California native. This is one of our California native onions, Allium unifolium, excuse me. And it's quite a strong grower and will grow on almost any soil. So this one you can put it in just about any garden. And as Laura says, it tends to seed around a little. And if you do have extra seedlings coming up and you don't want them, you can eat them. So this is a good edible, blooming right now, and it will be gone in just another about a month and a half. You won't see any signs of it at all. So they go away fairly quickly once they finish flowering and we get warmer, drier weather. The next plant, forgive me, I'm going to probably murder that. It's Mathiasella blue.
It's a mouthful, Steve. I say Buplurioides, but
Buplurioides. It rolls right off the tongue.
You said it better than I would have, Steve.
This is actually a distant relative of carrots. You can kind of see that in the foliage there with these remarkable pendulous flowers that are green with a little hint of, looks like a hint of pink in there. It's named after Mildred Mathias. She did not discover this. If you go on this, if you want to actually look at the history of the plant in cultivation, if you go on the San Marcos website, they have the information there about the people who discovered it and when it was first listed and things. But it is named after Mildred Mathias, a past Horticulturist of the Year recipient from Southern California Horticultural Society. And actually, I think if I read correctly, Carol Bornstein actually gave the seed to, was it? You know what, I'm gonna mess that up. I read this really quickly. So go on the San Marcos Growers website. They actually don't have any right now. They say that they're in between. They're trying their best to get it back into production. Apparently they're using their own plant for seed production, and it seems to be an every other year sort of thing for them. So this is something, it's every once in a while when we do these plant forum things, I start marking down on my plant lust booklet. I keep names aside to do searches every once in a while. This is one of those things I think I'm gonna keep on my plant lust list. So Carol, I need to talk to you.
Yeah, this is a pretty extraordinary plant. One of my faves.
And this is another well, I thought this was a California native. It says Mexico. So this is Peridoli and Cana, Guadalupe Island. Oh, it's the Guadalupe Island Roctaceae. Okay, this is not the one I was thinking. This does, of course, coming from the islands down there, is it just the the islands? This would grow well in a native garden. It looks a little sort of almost like a Dusty Miller, but it's, I think, a little more elegant looking. This is wonderful foliage, and Carol says to prune after flowering to retain the bushy form. Sun to light shade and very low water. Yes.
Someone does have a question. Is it part of CFP? Orchid Black says yes.
Yes, it is. Part of the California Floristic Province.
Which, of course, the California Floristic Province, for those who don't know, doesn't follow the borders. You need to look it up on a map. It's quite interesting. It starts in Oregon and ends in Mexico and out onto the islands. So the California Floristic Province is actually, I think it's in tonight's book. That's going to be part of the door prize. You can probably see a nice map in that book. So if not, you can look it up online. This is April Curtis has sent this in. This is Eochroma Pretty in Pink. And for anyone who grows Eochroma, you know, these are hummingbird magnets. There are, in my garden, I have the purple one, the much more common Eochroma cyanea, I think it is. And there are fights every morning. I have about 6 hummingbirds that do aerial battles to try and claim the thing. So they're related to things like angels, trumpets, and daturas, and in that family. And they grow fast. It's a kind of soft growth that hardens off. It will develop some sort of semi-woody stems. and can be pruned hard if you need to. They're frost tender. They do like their water, but once they get deeply watered, they can actually go a fair amount of time between waterings, and they tend to bloom all throughout warm weather. So if you want to have a natural source of nectar for hummingbirds in your garden that goes nearly year round, or at least in warm weather, this one, you can't beat these, the Aromas. This is Indigofera tinctoria. This is true indigo, so this is grown for creating a dye that's, of course, gives us the word indigo. It's that purplish blue, that very, very deep purplish blue. The dye is produced from the leaves, and I think also the roots, if I'm not mistaken. I seem to recall reading that somewhere many years ago. And she says she's been growing this for 6 years, and deciduous perennial to about 4 feet, and it's from Asia and Africa, and she got it at the Huntington sale. I missed seeing April's garden. I'm so sorry I didn't get to see it when she actually invited people. And anyway, I have a rose for her, so I'm going to be talking to her. I'll get a private viewing, I think. She also sent in this. This is Salvia africana cerulea, blue African sage. The two most common sages from Africa are from the Cape region, and both of them are shrubby and can take this blistering hot sun. They're extremely tough. They can be cut back as hard as you need to. This one with this, they're really lovely pale blue flowers with a little hint of lavender to them. And then there's there's a couple of different forms of Salvia lutea that are really quite worth looking at. This was purchased at the Huntington. You can get them at other nurseries occasionally. You do see these. And they take a little while to establish, but once you do, they tend to be really easy to grow, and will grow in a just a moderately watered garden, even down to, if depending on your soil. I've had these get by with once a month watering on some of the sort of more clay-like soils. You actually need to be really careful about not overwatering them. So take a look at some of these African salvias. Are definitely worth growing. And I do think that might be, yes, that is it. So thank you everyone for sending in plants for the forum. And I will turn it back over so we can hear Bart give us what I hope is a wonderful talk. I'm expecting it.
I'm sure it will be. And we actually have a question in the chat about why have plants in the presentation that are from Asia. And I think it's important to showcase some of the plants that are growing in our area. I think it's really nice too, to see the different colors, the different blooms, and maybe make people familiar with plants that they wouldn't normally have grown on their own or have known that could be grown in the area. So we do have a nice blend of natives that are presented and some that are not native to California, but that grow well here.
Yeah, there was a nice cross section there. Actually, you had pretty much covered almost everything in this one.
Yeah, and it's nice to have members share, what they're proud of in their gardens right now too. And the plant forum is a great opportunity for anyone who has not been a part of our webinars before. It's a great opportunity to learn from others and also to ask questions. So if you ever find anything out in your walks or out in a park that you just need help identifying as well, maybe something that you'd like to try growing on your own, but you can't identify it, you can always send that in to us as well. And we talk about it here. We send it to our board for anything that hasn't been identified. And so we run through our plant gurus to find the best answers and educate, because that's really what we're all about at the Southern California Horticulture Society, is really to educate on horticulture and to spread the wealth. And so on that note, spreading wealth and spreading knowledge, thank you, Steve. And next up, we have Carol Bornstein, who will be presenting tonight's speaker. And if you're just joining us as well, if you haven't already, put in the notes some of your favorite cultivars or nativars And if you're not growing either right now, some of your favorite plants that you have. All right. Thank you, Carol.
Okay, thanks, Erin. Well, it is my distinct pleasure and a real treat to introduce Bart O'Brien, tonight's speaker. From a name recognition standpoint, I would wager, and I'm not a betting person, that probably everybody who's logged in this evening to hear this presentation knows about Bart from a whole array of different avenues. If you're interested in plants, which people who are here clearly are, you have undoubtedly come across his name because he's involved in so many different things that are plant related, not only here in California, but worldwide. He is known worldwide. He has been honored with a number of different awards, including the Horticulturist of the Year award from the Southern Cal Hort Society several years ago. And most recently, he was acknowledged by the American Horticultural Society with their highest award, the Liberty Hyde Bailey Award, which is conferred on individuals who have made significant contributions to the world of plants through at least three of the following avenues. And I'm gonna rattle these off for you, because I would not have remembered them by memory. So contributions in the world of art, business, communications, research, administration, leadership, teaching, or plant exploration. So in order to qualify for this award, you have to have contributed in at least three of those. And with Bart, he checks every single box. He has contributed to all of these in really important ways. He is a consummate plantsman in the realm of both horticulture as well as botany, has encyclopedic knowledge of California native plants as well as plants from several other Mediterranean climate regions and beyond. He previously, before he took the position of garden director at the Regional Parks Botanic Garden in Berkeley, where he's been for, I think, about 9 years. He was at the Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, now the California Botanic Garden, for 20 some odd years. Initially as the director of horticulture and the curator of the living collections, and then director of special projects. And I'm sure many of the people listening in benefited from the incredible assembly of plants that he pulled together for their annual fall plant sales, which were just phenomenal. He also co-coordinated a really marvelous symposium series called Out of the Wild and Into the Garden that brought together horticulturists and botanists from across the state to talk about all things with respect to native plants at a time when a lot of the information that was shared was just not readily available. So those were terrific symposia, and he actually helped to publish the proceedings of those. So the information is still out there to be shared. He is a consummate plant collector and explorer. He has traveled all across the state, collecting probably thousands by now, collections of propagules for not only Rancho when he was there, but of course now at the Regional Parks Botanic Garden, adding to their significant plant collections and their herbaria. Maybe he'll say something about one of the most recent displays that he has overseen at the regional parks, which is the Crevice Garden. And as part of these plant explorations, he has also discovered out in the wild as well as in gardens, dozens of cultivars that he has selected, named, and introduced to the world of horticulture and gardening. And that's what he's here to talk with us about this evening, about the world of cultivars, specifically with respect to natives. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Bart. Take it away.
Well, thank you for that very generous introduction, Carol.
You are welcome. Much deserved.
Thank you. I will start screen sharing, and I just added a few slides based on what I was hearing in the plant discussion. Let's see, make sure I've got the right one. Yes. I'm not sure. What, are you seeing the cultivar talk?
Yes.
And
Yes, it's not in slideshow mode yet.
yes, now it is, or now it should be.
Yes.
Yeah, as I get started, actually, I just wanted to have two short digressions. One is that I'm going to hold up to my camera, so you'll have to look in your upper right-hand corner. But, oh, that actually is not coming through very well. But there's a very, very good color form of rich pink, Allium unifolium, or uniflorum, that the cultivar name is Wayne Roderick. And it is the form that has seeded all over the Botanic Garden here, and is definitely one of the best and easiest forms of that species to grow. And it's in our Sea Bluff, in our Klamath area. It just shows up all over. And it's always welcome. Almost all of our native onions, by the way, are usually fairly shallow bulbs and will rot out if they're overwatered typically. However, uniflorum is very easy and very tolerant. It will tolerate being wet or getting some water as long as it's not overwatered. So, oh, the other thing I meant to do was turn on my timer so that I will know when I'm supposed to stop, but I probably won't. I'll probably just keep going. So anyway, today is cultivars and California native plants and nativars. This is going to be a lot of text-heavy slides just because of the topic. But I certainly hope and expect that people will ask questions or be more interactive with this, because some of it's fairly technical. But in this first slide, you're seeing three different plants. One is a typical plant of actually the of Chamosiferous lawsoniana. And it's one here in our botanic garden that just spontaneously had that bud mutation. Interestingly enough, Chamosiferous lawsoniana is the species with the most cultivars out of just the single species. There are over 400. Actually, I think it might even be closer to 600 by now. And that's just out of a single species. That's not a hybrid. It's just something like this happening, or people growing them from seed and finding interesting variations. And the variations are quite broad and incredible. And most of them aren't widely grown. The middle one is an intergeneric hybrid between Chiranthodendron pentadactylon from Chiapas and Guatemala, or Chiapas, state of Chiapas, Mexico, and Guatemala in Central America. And the third is there just as a something to be misleading. It is a mutation, but it is not a cultivar, and it has never been, and shockingly, it's never been named. And that's the albino form of redwood. And that many of you may be familiar with them. They actually can be grown from cuttings, and eventually they'll turn, many of them will turn green. And then we'll just do this kind of growth at the base. So not a cultivar. But to get into the California Floristic Province, these 3 slides here are what I just added. But that since we're talking about cultivars out of California and the California Floristic Province, it is this portion of California is definitely the Mediterranean zone, and here is Guadalupe Island. And actually it includes more of the Pacific Islands off of Baja, all the way down to Cedros and Natividad and the San Benitos. And then up here and through the Jepson Manual, everyone considers the Sierra Nevada, the Klamath Siskiyou area, and the redwood forests to be Californian. Although in Southern California at Rancho, all of the researchers and I got together and decided, no, they're really transitional. And that if you continue this line to about like this is how the Jepson and Northern Californians think of the California Floristic Province, including all of this wetter transition area. And again, when people say, well, why is the Sierra in there? When you think of our Mediterranean climate, it is cool, wet winters, hot, dry summers. If you go hiking or backpacking in the Sierra Nevada, what happens almost every afternoon? Rain. You get thunderstorms. And in the North Coast and in the redwood forests, you get fog drip all summer long. And that it can amount to something like 50-something inches over the course of a year, just through fog drip. So anyway, that's that. But also, there's no place that really has all of the plants of California and the Floristic Province enumerated. This particular paper, principally by Dylan Burge and others, and then our Baja California Floristic Province group, is the first and only enumeration of all of the plants of California and the California Floristic Province. And that it was a special issue of Madroño. You can see it here, the reference. And since this is recorded, you can come back and see it later. And then this is sort of what it is. And this is the Salvia page. So you can see which ones are endemic to the Floristic Province, which ones are in the Oregon part of the CFP, and which ones are in the California or Baja California CFP. And then the Jepson regions, Northwest, the Cascades, the Sierra, the Great Valley, Central Western and Southwestern parts of the state. So if you really want to see where things are and what things are very common, like this one, Scutellaria tuberosa is found in every single one. And yet it is an endemic, not found anywhere else other than the Floristic Province. So you can find things like that. But now we're going to get into cultivars.
Bart, we do have a question.
Sure.
This is from Laura. Where can one get X Curantho? I'm going to mess this up. Curantho Fremontonia?
Yeah. Curantho Fremontia.
There we go. You knew exactly what I was saying.
Yep.
Are there nurseries that regularly make crosses for the hybrid, or are they all grown from cuttings?
Actually, that's part of the cultivar talk. So we'll go into that specifically later during those slides, because that'll totally answer that question in the slides coming up. But anyway, first of all, to get into what cultivars are, you have to sort of understand, quote unquote, lower level plant taxonomy. And that is formas and cultivars are very closely related concepts. Forma, it goes genus, species, subspecies, botanical variety, forma, and then cultivar. Cultivar means that it's found in cultivation, but there are lots of formas of California native plants that have been named, but nobody really tracks them because nobody pays that much attention to them. They usually just end at either variety or subspecies. But like I said, many things are named at the forma level, which are the plants found in the wild that have different characteristics. And the example there to focus on is this one, Cicericium bellum forma album. That would be all of the white flowered, blue-eyed grass that you ever find out in the wild. Now, when somebody decides to cultivate them or grow them, either from division or tissue culture or seed and selects white ones, then they can get cultivar names. And one of them is usually just known as Cicericium bellum Merck's white, but it really is Cicericium bellum forma album Merck's white, just a white flowered form that has been designated as a cultivar. Or the cut leaf form of Polypodium californicum, which many of us know as Sarah Lyman. It's actually forma Branscombii, which is the one that was found, the individual that was found in the wild in Napa County. And Sarah Lyman is it just in cultivation with a name, a cultivar name. And then cultivariants, it's, actually, we'll get into cultivariant in another slide. But cultivar is the word coined by Liberty Hyde Bailey of Cornell in 1923. And it's generally thought that he meant cultivated and variety. Although, as I wrote up for the introduction, it could have been cultigen, but cultivated variety is what has been the usual accepted meaning or convention of what he did. And that all cultivars have common language names in English, Spanish, German, Japanese, whatever. Latin names are not accepted as cultivar names for any cultivar named after January 1st, 1959. And cultivar names are always written within single quotation marks, and those single quotation marks are an actual part of the name. So any punctuation is outside of that. So if it was Erigeron glaucus Wayne Roderick, comma, it is, the comma is after the single quote, or a period would be after the single quote. And then illustrating this are two plants that are frequently confused in nurseries and gardens. The top right one, Erigeron glaucus Wayne Roderick, is a Wayne Roderick selection that does have those almost electric purple flowers. There's no other Erigeron like it. And it is a selection direct from the wild. In the lower right-hand side is the widely known and grown Erigeron WR, which stands for Wayne Roderick, but its name is WR, and it is a hybrid. If you look at it, its flower stems are long, the peduncles. Right here, you can see a very long one. And they're usually produced in groups all together. And they are above a foliage mat, whereas most Erigerons are on shorter stems and are much closer to the foliage, and the foliage is typically more bushy, but not always. So Erigeron WR is thought to be a hybrid, and Erigeron glaucus Wayne Roderick is definitely the beach daisy, Erigeron glaucus. So hopefully that's clear. Two completely different plants, both cultivars, both honoring Wayne Roderick, who found both of them. So this is just the original publication of, or that included the word cultivar. And it was something that I gave you guys for what the talk was about. But this slide also just has all of the information about it, about where you can find this and what Gentes Herbarum is. It's the name of a journal out of Cornell. And yet another Erigeron glaucus cultivar, Bountiful, which was actually a seedling of Erigeron glaucus arthurmenses, but that had bigger flowers, more ray flowers, and was just super profuse. And then just two things about cultivars. Almost all of us tend to think that the word cultivar indicates that it's clonally produced, but that is not part of the definition anywhere for this concept. The concept itself, cultivar, just means that the plant in question has a desirable trait or set of traits that the cultivar name was used for. So it can be that a cultivar name like Merck's White could be used for all cultivated white flowered blue-eyed grass, but most of us don't really like to think of it that way. So it just can be sort of a dwarf plant with white flowers. All of them that are dwarf and white flowered could be a single cultivar. All of the white double flowered ones could be a cultivar. And this is of anything, not just Cicericium. Fastigiate growth habit can all just be lumped together in one cultivar name. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a clone. However, most of us and most nurseries do apply it that way. Now, in England, they're actually, and in Europe, they're coming up with cultivar classes. And that the classic one to use is, almost all of us know the cut leaf forms of Japanese maple. And that there are red ones, there's green ones, there's mounding ones, there's more upright ones, but they all have dissected leaves. So now there's the Acer palmatum dissectum class, so that if you're talking about all of those dissected leaf ones, you can just refer to them that way, rather than by the 50 to 100 individual cultivar names of those types. And yet everyone knows what you're talking about by a dissectum sort. Or if you were talking about an album form of something, you'd know it was one of the many white flowered ones. Cultivar classes as a concept hasn't really caught on that much in North America, but it certainly is applicable to some of the more complicated groups. And then cultivariant, which was on the other slide, and that this has the classic example. And unfortunately, all of my images of this are of slides, which I didn't get scanned. But many of you probably know from Rancho's cultivar garden, there's a tree of Sequoia sempervirens nanopendula. Nanopendula is typically thought of as a prostrate growing, very wide needled coast redwood. However, if it's staked, or over time, it will develop an upright leader and it will become a tree. And so in Europe, it was named cantab or cantabrica to indicate that it's the upright tree form versus what it really is, which is prostrata or nanapendula or pendula nana or prostrata cantab or repens, all of which have been used for that specific plant. And yet they're very, very different plants in your garden. I mean, if you want a nana or the prostrata form, obviously you wouldn't buy cantab, which is a tree. But yet genetically, it's all the same thing. So that's where the term cultivariant kind of comes from, where things are genetically the same thing, but due to plant hormones, they have different ways of growing. This also can be seen, it's most often seen in conifers. And I really like that first line here. Cultivariant is a term that is most often used by quote unquote conifer people. And it is true, you know, witches' brooms are still in most cases genetically the same as the rest of the tree. It's just some kind of mutation that then creates a different way of growing. So that's also, cultivariants are the same thing as clonal variants and clonal variation. Sometimes it gets a little vague as to, or all these things can get kind of vague. Someone had typed into the chat earlier that Pecos Rancho was one of their favorite cultivars, and this is it. So this actually is a plant that's of the California Floristic province, definitely not of the state of California. It's found on the Cedros Island and down along the Baja coast. And again, it's a very simple, easily understood cultivar. It's just a very profuse flowering pastel form of what we used to call Verbena lilacina. Now it's been reclassified to glandularia, which sounds like a disease. And many people grow Salvia Clevelandii Winifred Gilman. This again is just a straight species that was not a hybrid, but growing in somebody's garden. I should have mentioned that Pecos Rancho was grown from seed. So again, you can have cultivars created from all kinds of things, either hybrids in the wild, hybrids in the garden, plants in the wild, plant hybrids from the wild, genetically engineered plants. Everything can be a cultivar. Salvia Aromas is actually a hybrid cultivar between Cleveland sage and Salvia leucophylla. And again, there are a whole lot of plants of that same hybrid cross, Clevelandii x leucophylla, or crossed with leucophylla. And they all look similar. They all have big flowers. They're all this sort of bluish color, oftentimes with a bit of purple in them. They're all very vigorous. And the flowers are paler than most Clevelandii. The plants are bigger than true Clevelandii. And there's no pink in them like there is in almost all Salvia leucophyllas. And they display usual hybrid vigor. Another hybrid is Howard McMinn Manzanita. And this one also goes back, or this one goes back quite a ways. to the 1950s. Actually, it goes back to the 40s. It was a seedling from that Lewis Edmonds gave to Howard McMinn at Mills College in 1949. And then cuttings of it were taken by Saratoga Hort in 1952. And it was introduced and named on November 1st, 1956. So it's an old cultivar, and it is one of the classics because it's so easy and so adaptable to garden conditions. This is a large specimen at Rancho Santa Ana. And then nativar. I looked into this concept, and that it was first proposed by Alan Armitage in 2008. And is combining the word native and cultivar. And this is direct from his article, and that's the reference for it. But I suggest we call native cultivars and hybrids nativars. If we use this term, purists may not get as upset with us for stealing their plants and diluting the meaning of native. That seems to be something that a lot of people have glommed onto. And when you think of things like the echinaceas, where there's all kinds of bizarre color forms and habits that have never been seen in the wild, you can see why some people would be perhaps derogatory about something referred to as a nativar. But with California plants, almost all of ours have fairly known origins, and that they can all be readily related back to wild California plants. Probably the only exceptions are some that have really been hybridized extensively, and there's really 3 groups that have been that are somewhat collector plants. Actually, there's now a few more. But the original one was monkey flowers, which serious hybridizing started in the 1950s, and then just got much, much more complicated and many colors now that you've never seen in the wild and probably never will. Our irises are another group that's been extensively hybridized. And a lot of those, you would never see anything like them in the wild. The third is lilies. Our native lilies have been used a lot in hybridization, and that many of the results of them you wouldn't find in the wild either. The fourth group that I was just thinking about was Lewisia. And if you're familiar with the Sunset strain and Little Plum and Little Peach and all those other weird ones, those are not like anything you would ever find in the wild either. Mostly because they're bringing species into contact that and hybridizing them that would never come together in the wild. And even if they came together in a garden, most of the time they would not successfully seed around and produce these real odd colored plants. Some other things that, other aspects that people have brought into the term nativar, and again, these are all referenced, so if you want to read the whole article and so on, you can. I thought that last one, nativar is one term for a cultivar of native species. Nativars are the result of artificial selections made by humans from the natural variation found in species. That is basically true for most hybrids and selections, but again, a lot of them, the middle one, often it has been developed by a plant breeder and would never be found in nature. That that's kind of what I was talking about with those four groups. And when you think of things like the echinaceas, but that it's not really what the term means or was used for. And that if you look up online and try to find a definition of nativar, there isn't one. You just have to go by a lot of different definitions. So it's still not a settled term in my mind anyway, even though various people have defined it different ways. It's sort of like it will probably evolve into something that everyone agrees on sooner or later. But just right now, it just means a native cultivar. And that's what all of these plants are that we're talking about. Some of the problems people have with nativars is that they're saying that they don't provide the same ecosystem services that quote unquote wild plants do. But yet again, the vast majority of California cultivars are actually from the wild or are from selections from gardens of plants that you would find in the wild. This is just one example, and I'm going to use several for different purposes here. Dancing Tassels chaparral currant, which is Ribes malvaceum, variety malvaceum, dancing tassels, was originally found out on San Clemente Island. And on San Clemente Island, historically, Ribes malvaceums got enormous, the size of trees. And that this particular plant is in my yard. It rooted through the pot and it's an incredibly vigorous plant. After 3 years, it has a trunk diameter of about that. It's about, what, 3 inches thick? And the inflorescences, which is why this plant was selected to begin and named to begin with, the flower clusters can be up to 1 foot long. And that it is used extensively by native bumblebees and hummingbirds, because as many of you know, Ribes malvaceum is one of the earliest in the season of new plants to flower, usually in late fall. I usually think of this and Arctostaphos, or Ribes malvaceum and Arctostaphos refusioensis as the beginning of the new year with the coming of the rains. And oftentimes they'll start flowering before the rains because they know that the rains are coming. The other thing that people object to nativars about is also that they don't produce the fruits and so forth of other natives. And I do want to just show you that, yes, this particular one has enormous fruits, almost to the point where you would think they were, well, they are edible. They're just not a particular flavor I like. Those fruits can be about close to a 1/2 inch long. I mean, they're quite large. And again, they just flower like crazy over many months. Mine started this year in a little bit late. It was actually in November, and it still has flowers on it now, but not quite, nowhere like the photo shows. But so sometimes cultivars actually provide more direct services to pollinators and birds than just quote unquote the standard species. Certainly if you are doing a restoration project on San Clemente Island, you could throw in a couple of dancing tassels, but that ideally most things would be just grown from seed or broadcast seed out into the habitat rather than other ribes malvaceums from other locations. And the same with other cultivars. I personally don't have a problem with adding, like if you were at Yankee Point in Monterey and you were doing an erosion control project, yes, if you threw in 2 or 3 plants of Ceanothus Yankee Point, I probably wouldn't have a problem with that. Some people probably would. But Yankee Point is from Yankee Point. So it's putting something back where it was originally from. And that is kind of the definition of restoration.
Bart, we do have a few questions so far.
Sure.
The first is, how do growers ensure consistency of form for hybrid or wild cultivars?
Well, again, consistency is what you get from one of 2 ways. Clonally, so pretty much every plant of ribes dancing tassels is this one. It's all been done clonally so that everyone knows those are the flowers you're going to get, and when they set fruit, that's what the fruit's going to look like. And that growth habit, that huge vigorous growth habit is what you're going to get, because it's all cuttings from the same plant. There's not any other ribes malvaceum that I know of that would fit in the definition of what people are expecting from dancing tassels. No other ribes malvaceum I've ever seen has this long of inflorescence or this large of fruits. So, so pretty much you have to buy the clone to get that group of characters. The exception to that with natives is annuals. If you've grown penny black baby blue eyes, it's got a black center and a white margin, but it's Nemophila menziesii. And that usually for stabilizing a seed cultivar, you have to grow it for multiple generations, and you need to be extremely rigorous about roguing out anything that is remotely different. So when you were stabilizing penny black and you were getting some all black flowered plants, you would have to just rip them out. And so that you could get consistency of pollination to pollination and getting out all the exceptions. That's why usually it's about 7 generations or 7 years of growing an annual plant from seed and roguing out all the wrong ones to get it stabilized. Sometimes it just can't be done because you're narrowing the germplasm too much and it no longer is adaptable to garden conditions or any conditions. It just gets too weak. There's not enough genetic variability in it. And other times you can't because there are too many native ones surrounding you that the pollinators visit and cross-pollinate to the ones you're trying to stabilize. That's why sometimes to get seed cultivars, they're oftentimes taken out of the region where they're originated from and are grown and seed bulked in an area where they won't hybridize with congeners or the exact same species. Does that answer that question?
I think so. I don't have any other follow-up questions to that,
Yes.
but there are a few other questions.
Sure.
One was, habitat value is determined by form and color or chemical compounds?
Wait, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, it's kind of a sentence with a question.
Sure.
Habitat value is determined by form and color or chemical compounds?
I'd say not especially either. Habitat value depends on many different factors, and it also is what habitat. If you are thinking of lots of different things here. Many people are growing plants for honeybees because honeybees are having problems. However, honeybees are not natives and they can displace native bee species. So one would be if you were planting plants for bees, it would be which bees, and then that would definitely probably influence which ones you would think of as having higher habitat value. If you're thinking of birds and you're thinking of native birds, it would be which species will be eating the caterpillars or the fruits or whatever characteristic you're looking for. I mean, some birds like quail require lots of open space. Many other birds require lots of dense shrubs that they can go hide in. So again, habitat value is more dependent upon what organism, what group of organisms you are valuing for what type of habitat. And that, yes, there's some general purpose things. I mean, I think probably many of you have read Doug Tallamy's books and that, and articles and research, and that they found that purple foliaged plants in general inhibit caterpillars, again, in general. And so if you were trying to create more food for birds, or if you were trying to encourage a more diverse lepidopteran fauna, you wouldn't be planting purple or red foliaged plants. That would be contraindicated. However, if it was a purple or red foliage rose foliage plant, then it could be very good habitat or cover for birds. It really just depends on what particular group or set of organisms you're looking to help.
All right, I have one last one about, is dancing tassels a form of island gigantism?
That's a good question. I don't think anybody knows, although it would seem to be. Interestingly, there are other ribes on other of our channel islands, and none of them are gigantic or are this particular form. This particular form from San Clemente Island, when it was originally described, was described as Ribes clementinum because they thought it was so different from all other ribes. It clearly is related to Ribes malvaceum, and that is where it has ended up. But by the same token, I oftentimes think about perhaps it should be Ribes malvaceum variety clementinum because it's this larger feature is a part of the population that is found only on San Clemente Island. There aren't little flower clustered normal sized plants.
So Bart, I'm going to interject here. You're saying that dancing tassels represents the population of Ribes malvaceum that you find on San Clemente Island, that they all tend to be large, robust plants with these really long inflorescences and long fruits?
Typically.
Okay, thank you.
However, there are not lots of them. I've only seen a handful of Ribes malvaceum on the island. And this particular one, actually, I thought someone might ask. I collected cuttings of this plant with Tom Haydock and Orlando Mastretta on April 7th, 1990, near the top of a side canyon of Bryce Canyon on San Clemente Island. And we were about 240 feet elevation. So that's where it's from. Was there another question?
Those are it for now.
Okay. Forward. Lewis Edmonds Manzanita is another good native plant cultivar that was selected in the wild and then later transferred also to Saratoga Horticultural Foundation at that point when it was in Saratoga, and is widely adaptable to many gardens. It doesn't look like a lot of Arctostaphos bakerii in the wild. It just is a particularly good horticultural form that's adaptable to gardens. And again, Arctostaphos bakerii is a fairly rare species in the wild. So in a way, it's growing this particular clone is an odd form of plant conservation in your home garden. It certainly doesn't help it in the wild, but it does allow you to talk about and educate people about dealing with rare plants and conservation of genetic heritage of rare plants via seeds and so forth. And it's a very nice plant. This is actually Carol Bornstein's old garden in Santa Barbara, her home garden. And Arctostaphos Sunset is a hybrid cultivar, known hybrid. It's actually an interesting case where it was found in the wild. And it's a hybrid between Arctostaphos pajaroensis and Arctostaphos hookeri, where they co-occur near Prunedale in Monterey County. And again, it's a good example of a cultivar / nativar. It flowers nicely, it's very dense growing, it produces lots of seeds. It doesn't seem to come up everywhere, so it's pretty well behaved ecologically. And yet it performs great in gardens. So would I like to see 10 million of them planted? No, but in your garden in LA, probably fine. Because it's not going to probably hybridize with other manzanitas in the area, because the nearest ones are in the Santa Monica's and in the San Gabriel's, and that they're glandulosa sorts or glauca sorts, or some very rare ones that are higher elevations. And odds are pollinators are not going to get from the plant in your garden to any plant in the wild that it might hybridize with. This is sort of a real interesting case because it's a rose hybrid, and it's between and again, I've got all of the information on this one as well, that it's between a hybrid polyantha rose and Rosa nucana, a native species. The flowers are quite large. You'll see that, well, I'll go to this next one and then I'll come back. That's a single flower and that's a gallon can. So it's big. And the rose hips are large and last a long time, all through winter, like many roses do. And this is it at Rancho Santa Ana by the Cultivar Garden. And that how one thinks about hybrids between natives and exotics is a whole other question. And this you get into, though, with quite an increasing number of our native plants. When you think about plants like this, or Heuchera rosata, or Santa Ana cardinal, or many of the Heuchera hybrids with sanguinea, which is from Arizona. I mean, it's not a great distance away, but it's still not a native plant. They're sort of half nativars, and they're certainly cultivars that involve California native plant germplasm. So again, they're kind of a gray area. But again, from cultivar standpoint, they fall definitely within the range of good cultivars. So this particular one does have a real good California connection. It was bred by Father George M. Schoner in Santa Clara, California, and was introduced by Conrad Pyle in 1930. It's a very interesting plant in that at Rancho, it did these long canes that were nearly thornless. And then up here, it's behaving a bit more like Rosa nucana, where it's producing more thickets of thin stems, but with big flowers. Who knows? But this is what it will do in your gardens in LA. And then here is the Chiranthophromantia, and that intergeneric hybrids are also cultivars. This one is very well known in California, horticulture, and that, whoops, oh, my time's almost up. It's first of all, intergeneric hybrids, the names are a combination of the two genera involved. So Catalpa for Chalopsis and Catalpa, Chiranthophromantia for Chiranthodendron and Formanodendron, Maho berberis, etc. And they're always preceded by the multiplication sign. So it's X or multiplication sign, Chiranthophromantia lenzii. And it's also why Lenzia ranchorum, which was originally proposed to be the name of this plant, is illegitimate and can't be used. You can only create a fantasy genus name like Lenzia if more than two genera are involved. And if you think about it, there aren't very many plant groups where you can cross 3 different genera. However, there are some that you can do wide generic hybridization, and that's orchids. And so many orchids involve 3 genera, 4 genera, 5 genera, 6 genera, and that then they can choose whatever name they want. This one for many years wasn't really, didn't have a cultivar name because it was the only one. And the original was created by Austin Griffiths when he was a grad student at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. And at the bottom of the screen, you see what it is. It was the hybrid between Formanodendron Pacific Sunset, which is already a hybrid Formanodendron, between Californicum and Mexicanum, and then Chiranthodendron pentadactylum. In intergeneric crosses or hybrids, and in hybrids in general, you list the seed parent first, and the pollen parent second. And that if you don't know what that is, you just do them alphabetically. It seems that more and more things are just being done alphabetically, but this was part of chivalry, letting the female plant go first. So you can say it was rather sexist and so forth, which it was, or which it is. So anyway, there now are more than one. This is another one, falling stars, which we don't know what the other parent was, but the one parent was the was Griff. Oops, sorry. Was Griff's Wonder. Whoop. Oh shoot. Sorry, I hit a wrong button. There. So one of the parents was Griff's Wonder, and the other was some unknown Formonodendron at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden. But this plant is named Falling Stars because it's a weeping form. And the only reason it had any height on it was because it was staked to the height of 8 feet. And then all the branches just came straight down. So it is only grown by cuttings. Same with Griff's Wonder, but that for many, many years, people had tried to hybridize it, cross it back with Formonodendron, and weren't successful. But I noticed that some plants were setting pods and then collected seeds and then grew them out, and this was one of them. The plant in the middle of the very first slide that I showed was actually another one of the back crosses, so the F2s, second generations. And it has a much oranger flower and a much browner, fuzzier leaf. And then there's a third one that exists still that's sort of a quote unquote dwarf one with sort of cantaloupe colored flowers. And again, they're all grown strictly by cuttings, although I did get another pod or two with a couple of seeds that I'm going to be sowing to see what comes up in a third generation. Who knows? Theoretically, there should be a lot of sorting back to Formonodendron and so on. At Rancho, there were about 40 different individuals of the F1 hybrid or the F2 hybrids. But shortly after I left, they stopped watering them during the drought, and all of them but 2 died. Fortunately, one of them was Falling Stars. So, and I have all of the known hybrid plants here. Where you can get them, usually Native Sons Nursery grows Griff's Wonder because they have the original hybrid plant. All of the plants at Rancho were cuttings off of that original plant that belonged to Austin Griffiths. And when he left Rancho, he took his hybrid plant with him and ended up working for Dave Frost and Bob Keefe at Native Sons Nursery in Arroyo Grande, and he gave Dave the plant for his garden. It is the only plant of Griff's Wonder that I am aware of that has never fallen over. And that it is one of the plants that oftentimes roots very strangely. And so it's not the most stable plant. And if you've grown Formonodendrons in general, you know that many of them have very shallow roots and will blow over in stiff winds if they're not well established or if they were too root bound. And that it's something that these hybrids, once they do tip over, they don't die. Typically, all you need to do is put in stakes to stabilize it so it doesn't rock much, and then it will send up new shoots from near the base that will actually become more tree-like, because most Chiranthedendron Griff's Wonder grow flat as almost a natural espalier. And that's, again, due to plant hormones, and it's somewhat like a cultivariant issue where it needs to kind of be cut back hard and allowed to produce a new main shoot, which will then be more like a tree. So yes, they're around. Cornflower farms used to always have this available in small numbers as liners that they would sell to other nurseries. And I'm sure other people have it. It's oftentimes available at botanic garden sales because it is such an unusual intergeneric hybrid. And then that's sort of how far back they go. Griff's Wonder dates back to 1981 and Falling Stars back to 2004. This sort of information is from my cultivar manuscript that some of you know about. But then one of the last things I wanted to talk about briefly are plant patents and trademarks, and that plant patents are directly related to cultivar names and germplasm. So you can't just patent a name without a plant. However, you can have a trademark without a plant. A trademark name is just the name, and it does not relate directly to specific plant germplasm. Actually, it's technically illegal if it does. So there's a lot of confusion about the two concepts, and that patented plants, the patents are only good for 20 years, and then they become public. Trademarks are forever. As long as they are, as long as the name continues to be used in quote unquote ordinary commerce. And there are some plant patented natives. Mahonia golden